Daredevil has been one of my favorite superheroes for a long time. Even though I vaguely remember him from a cameo in the Spider-Man animated series, it wasn't until the 2003 Daredevil movie that I really became interested in the character. I feel like, since the release of the Netflix series and Ben Affleck's role as Batman, this movie really has come up a lot more in conversation over the past few years. Yes, it's certainly very much a product of its time, complete with a nu metal soundtrack, Matrix-esque slow-motion bullet time effects, and of course, dark, brooding characters in very tight leather outfits. Yeah, this was an interesting time for superhero movies. Despite the overly angsty and often corny delivery though, I honestly really enjoyed this film as a teenager, and I still think it has some good elements. Most importantly, it did introduce me to the basics of Matt Murdock and his lore, as Affleck did a pretty good job, right? In any case, Affleck did a decent job and the core of the character was intact, albeit with a less timeless approach attached to that film. A few years later, the first graphic novel that I ever purchased was The Guardian Devil Trade, which is still one of my favorite storylines and honestly, probably the best Daredevil story that I've read. It's also the first thing that I ever reviewed on YouTube for that matter. And since I feel like embarrassing myself, here's a clip.
Hey, I'm Joe. This is my first attempt at some kind of review. I'm going to review Daredevil, Guardian Devil. Well, it's basically the first comic that I ever read. Well, not the first comic, the first graphic novel I ever purchased. And it's actually one of my favorites. I think it's one of the best superhero comics ever written.
I've discussed this particular comic several times, but if you haven't read it, I do highly recommend it. As for why I personally enjoy Daredevil so much, I'm honestly not sure. Until fairly recently, I was the only person I knew to rank Daredevil fairly high among superheroes that I enjoyed. It may have to do with the fact that I really liked the comics I read, but even Frank Miller, who basically reinvented the character and made him popular, once said that Daredevil was often dismissed as a poor man's Spider-Man, though that was kind of before he got his hands on it. Personally, I always thought he had more in common with Batman, as his style of crime fighting and investigation is very similar, being a ninja/detective with a very dark, brooding approach. I'm Daredevil! Yeah, I guess the 2003 movie ended up being a test run for Affleck's role as Batman after all, as he did play them very similarly, though I think he added a bit more personality to Daredevil. You know, the fact that Daredevil was a blind guy with hypersenses is pretty cool, I guess, though I think it sometimes gets lost if writers don't focus on it enough. After all, his other senses are so powerful he can kind of see better than the average person in a way. I do like it when writers play with this idea when Matt is investigating or fighting. It's something the Netflix show has done pretty well early on. I've been rewatching it recently to get ready for the new season. Hype! As for the character himself, he's just kind of intense. He's got the whole hardcore Catholicism thing driving him, often coming into conflict with the methods he takes to fight crime. He's also a lawyer who holds much value with the justice system, but also takes it upon himself to be a vigilante and break the law. I guess that's one thing I like about Matt. He's complicated and filled with contradictions. This often forces him to question how far he will go in fighting crime. Daredevil has come very close to killing some of his worst villains, and often coming into conflict with other heroes like Spider-Man over these moral issues. Tragedy also seems to follow him wherever he goes, as he's lost not one but two girlfriends to the same villain. He also doesn't seem to care that much about his secret identity, as that's kind of become a big problem for him over the years. I've really enjoyed the Netflix show so far, as I think it's been very consistently good in comparison to the other Netflix shows. It's really balanced the superhero genre with elements of crime thriller and legal drama. I've also particularly enjoyed the relationship between Daredevil and Kingpin, as that dynamic is one of the most interesting aspects of classic Daredevil stories. In addition to Guardian Devil, I highly recommend checking out some of these other classics like Born Again, The Man Without Fear, Daredevil Yellow, and Underboss. Well everyone, those are my thoughts on Daredevil. What do you guys think about the Devil of Hell's Kitchen? Let me know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for new videos each week. And if you're feeling generous, check out my Patreon for requested videos so I can keep this channel growing. Next time we'll be talking about a classic horror film. Until then, stay magical.